Hey guys, Brett Weiss here. Welcome to another video. Today I'm talking about the 4 most iconic video game consoles of all time, the Mount Rushmore of game systems, if you will. But very briefly, we do have a sponsor today. That is Tony Temple and Missile Commander, his awesome new book about the arcade classic Missile Command. It's about his personal experiences with the game. Although it's much more than that, it's about the history of the game, some of the technical aspects of the game. And Dave Thurer, who created Missile Command, provides the foreword, so that gives it legit cred right there. Very nice hardcover book. A softcover edition is also available. Now there are some very nice photos in here, but it is loaded down with text. So this is gonna be a good long read for you guys. Check it out, really cool. Missile Commander by Tony Temple. I will put a link in the description of this video to the book where you can buy it on Amazon. So just check it out, Missile Commander. Thanks, Tony, for the book. I really appreciate it. So let's get to it. Now, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. That's really helpful. Now, 4 iconic game consoles, the 4 most the consoles that just really ingrained themselves into our pop culture, that were super popular and that were awesome. And I'm gonna go chronologically here instead of in order of iconic greatness or whatever. So let's get to it. Number 4, the Atari 2600 from 1977.
Okay, Atari, let's see your best pitch.
Now you might be thinking, well, that's not one of the 4 greatest consoles of all time. Arguably, you can say that or not, but I'm talking about the 4 most iconic here. Now, the Atari 2600 popularized video games. Check it out. I've got my wood grain model here. Love the 2600. I've had this for many, many years. I didn't get a 2600 in 77 when it came out, but I did go to my cousins and my friends' houses, just constantly going to their house to try to play their consoles. Probably got tired of me after a while, but man, I was just mesmerized by it. I remember in 77 going over to a kid at school named Lawrence Thorpe's house and playing Combat for the first time. Wow, great 2-player game, phenomenal, just mano-a-mano action, shooting action, very cool. And then later going to Mike Mall's house and playing Combat and some other games, including Space Invaders. And speaking of Space Invaders, the 2600 was fairly popular when it came out, but it languished a little bit in those first few years. I mean, it had a great launch lineup, but it really took off in 1980 when Space Invaders came out. That brought Atari 2600 in the forefront like never before, like no other console before it. Yeah, there were consoles before it, like the Magnavox Odyssey from 1972, the Fairchild Channel F from 76. There were dedicated Pong consoles and clones and things like that. But the 2600, originally the Atari VCS, really brought video games and gaming to the forefront, to the mainstream of America at home. The 2600 became a cultural touchstone, a fixture in living rooms across the country, and with great games like Missile Command, Dig Dug, and Miss Pac-Man that captured the essence of the arcade games. You know, the graphics and sounds didn't match the arcade classics, of course, but the Atari games captured the essence of these games, and they really just a ton of fun on the 2600. At one point, Atari was the fastest growing company in US history, and their just legends around the company continue. You know, the atmosphere of working at the company, surrounded by hippies and pot smoke and hot tub parties and all this stuff. Very laid back atmosphere where people, the programmers came and went pretty much as they pleased, and how there's just so many stories around E.T. and the great video game crash and the New Mexico landfill burial, and just Atari. Video games were synonymous with Atari. Your grandma might say, "Stop playing Atari, son and boy, and go outside and ride your bicycle. Go play outside." That kind of thing. Atari was synonymous with video games, so the Atari 2600 definitely belongs on the Mount Rushmore of game consoles for sure. Now I'm going to skip over 2 great iconic consoles, the Intellivision, which really had some great sports games, and a lot of people remembered fondly growing up playing, and the ColecoVision, my favorite retro console of all time. Got to skip past those because only 4 can be featured to the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Now you're playing with power.
Released nationwide in 1986, and this is the US version of the Famicom, which was released in Japan in 1983. Now, the NES is an obvious choice. The NES changed gaming forever. Now, the controller was revolutionary. It was better than any controller that came before it. And everyone recognizes the iconic toaster model of the NES. Just very iconic, of course. And the IPs that were created for the system, these franchises, Super Mario Brothers, Legend of Zelda, Metroid, these resonate to today. Not only do these IPs continue selling systems like the Switch, just the makeup of NES games, the way worlds are divided up, the expansive natures of the games, saving your progress, all that kind of stuff resonates with games, game consoles, and gamers today. Nintendo became synonymous with video games at this point, supplanting Atari in that regard. And just the cultural impact, passwords, the Konami code, tips and tricks, blowing in the cartridge to make it work, all that kind of stuff. The Wizard movie, which was basically a big advertisement for Super Mario Bros. 3, which came out in 1990. Super Mario Bros. 3 brought the NES even more to the forefront, and there were so many great games for the console. Kirby, just amazing. Tetris, on and on and on. The NES is obviously super iconic, and one way it changed games, there were more solo adventures that were more engrossing and more story-driven and more adventure-driven, like Legend of Zelda, like Super Mario Brothers, like so many other titles in Metroid, where it's more of a solo individual experience. And more kids around this time, late 80s, early 90s, started getting television sets in their bedrooms. A lot of NESs went to, a lot of kids had game systems in their bedrooms for the first time. Before that, game systems were usually relegated to the living room. Families would typically have just one TV, maybe a second TV, but the game system tended to be in the living room because the NES offered more solo experiences, more story-driven experiences, more adventure-related games like Super Mario Brothers, Legend of Zelda, and Metroid. These games were more non-linear, more open-ended, relatively speaking, and more of a solitary experience. And during the late 80s and early 90s, more kids had TVs in their bedrooms, and so it just sort of changed the nature of gaming in that respect. So the NES was super influential in so many ways and just so ingrained in our pop culture. I remember listening to a political talk radio show one time, and he usually talked about, just current events, politics, and everything. Well, they had 2 or 3 segments on the NES, and I was like, wow, the NES has really ingrained itself in our culture when just mainstream, talk radio, TV, and all that stuff, the NES was referenced more and more, even more so than the Atari 2600. So that's number 3. Now, again, these aren't in order of greatness or cultural importance. They are chronologically. Now I'm going to skip over the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo to go to the next console. And yeah, that's tough because these are both great, iconic systems. I mean, who can forget Sega does what Nintendo don't, the blast processing of the Genesis, the awesome Super Nintendo with so many great games, over 700 games released in the US for each console. But I have to skip past them because they don't quite fit on the all-time Mount Rushmore of video games.
16-bit Super Nintendo with Super Mario World. Wow!
What's this one?
Oh, this is Sonic the Hedgehog from Sega Genesis.
And we are jumping ahead to 1994 and the release of the Sony PlayStation. So we're jumping ahead to 1994 with the Sony PlayStation. Awesome top loader here. Plays CDs, which is pretty cool. Love the memory cards, the great ease of which you could save your progress. Awesome. Now the PlayStation, it brought 3D gaming and CD-based games into the mainstream. Now, it wasn't the first CD-based system, it wasn't the first to feature 3D graphics, but it brought those things into the mainstream and changed gaming in that way to make that the way of gaming moving forward. And the PlayStation seemed more adult, with games like Metal Gear Solid, with Resident Evil, Gran Turismo, games that were more sophisticated and adult or complex in nature. It really brought the gaming to the forefront for adults. The PlayStation took the average age of the gamer from 14 years old to 23. And it also had just general popular mainstream releases like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, Tomb Raider, Castlevania, Symphony of the Night, Parappa the Rappa. So some different genres here, like extreme sports with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. And it gave us the first Spider-Man game where you actually felt sort of like you were Spider-Man swinging through the city. Very cool. Huge leap over the 2600 version or any of the 16 or 8-bit versions. Very cool. The DualShock analog controller. Wow, this was a great step ahead in controllers. Love this. Still probably my favorite controller of all time. And just the PlayStation. Now you might ask about the PlayStation 2. Why didn't I include that? Because it is the best-selling console of all time, and it was a big leap ahead of the PlayStation. Much better 3D graphics. Because the PS1 came first, and it just started, it sort of began, you know, the 3D stuff, the making gaming, you know, more for adults. It began with the PlayStation, and the PlayStation 2 was a brilliant follow-up. And one reason the PlayStation, the original PlayStation, is so iconic is because it led to the PlayStation 2. So the PlayStation 2 just barely missed the cut. If Mount Rushmore had 5 heads, the PlayStation 2 would likely take that 5th spot. So no knock against the PlayStation 2. If I cheated a little bit, I'd probably have PlayStation and PlayStation 2 share the spot, but I can't do that. There can only be 4 heads. Wouldn't want a 2-headed president on Mount Rushmore. That'd be pretty weird. All right, so let's get to number 1 chronologically. The Xbox 360. That's right, the Xbox 360 from 2005. It was a follow-up to the OG Xbox, and it was way before Microsoft started, you know, having these crazy names for their systems that were so confusing, like Xbox One and Series X. The Xbox 360. I got my 360 when they came out with this R2-D2 edition, the Star Wars edition. Absolutely love. It's so awesome, and you can see the console on the back there. It makes R2-D2 noises, so cool, and it has the C-3PO controller. Absolutely love it. That's when I got my 360. Love me some 360. And what was so big about the Xbox 360 is that it emphasized online multiplayer gaming. It brought Marshall McLuhan's Global Village into the living room. Innovations like achievements and gamer score turned the 360 into a global battleground. I mean, yeah, there was online gaming years and even decades before the 360 came out, but the 360 brought us to where we are today. It really made online gaming kind of an expectation with game consoles, absolutely. And I mean, whether you're playing Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare, Halo 3, Forza Horizon, I mean, online gaming was just an absolute, it just took over gaming. The whole cultural landscape of gaming changed bigly with the Xbox 360, and so many great games. Mass Effect, Gears of War, Saints Row, Left 4 Dead, and on and on and on. Love me some Xbox 360, and that's still the main primary console I have hooked up in my game room. Yes, I do have a Switch, but of all the modern, relatively modern and recent game consoles, I'll probably play the 360 more than any of the others. Now, I want you guys to let me know in the comments what game consoles what would be your Mount Rushmore of game consoles, or which ones would you switch out? Which ones did I leave off? You know, if I did this list a couple of years from now, it's possible the Switch could take the place. Why isn't the Wii on here? The Wii was obviously a huge cultural phenomenon. Well, the Wii was big and it was, appealed to all demographics, but it was more of an anomaly than something that transformed the industry, if you know what I mean. So anyway, let me know in the comments where I went wrong and what I got right. Now, thanks again to Tony Temple and his awesome book, Missile Commander. Thank you for sponsoring this episode. And if you guys do like video game books, check out my NES Omnibus Volume 1, A through L. Gorgeous full-color hardcover. And in the description, I will put links to Tony's book and my books, of course. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. And again, let me know where I went wrong on my Mount Rushmore of video game consoles. We will talk to you guys in another video.